Good afternoon, everyone. So today's class, as discussed, will be related to principle of design. We will be starting with the very basic principle of design, that is symmetry, or I must tell that is word balance. Under balance, we will be studying symmetrical, asymmetrical, followed by radial balance, how it affects the interior design structures and everything in natural life, also how we can find them. So please make sure while the class, both your mic, your mics are off, and post the class, like the discussion is over, theoretical class is over, you can ask all your doubts. Okay. Am I clear to both of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So I'll be sharing my screen and we will be starting the class. I guess the screen is visible to both of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, as discussed in the earlier classes, in the one in which we were discussing the basics and all, we have tried to understand things related to balance. And over there, I have given you some explanation related to symmetrical balance, followed by how this asymmetrical balance works, where we can see them, what are the different aspects of its usage and all these things. Now we will see these examples and how it is being used and implemented and what it is actually like, in terms of theoretical knowledge. We will try to know this terminologies aspects also. So talking about balance, we have the very first kind is known as a symmetrical balance. So when we talk about symmetry, this exact very word symmetry defines that whatever is there in the composition, we will try to find the axis that might be horizontal, might be vertical, might be diagonal. On both sides of the axis, similar things are present. The very term symmetry defines this thing that symmetrical means things are exactly the same, right? So when we talk about symmetry or when we look at symmetry, the very first concept or the very first thing which should come to our mind is mirror image. So whatever you place on this side of the mirror, on the other side of the mirror, it looks alike, and we call it that okay, this this is symmetrical. Now let's assume in a mirror image, or when we are talking about things in aspects of a mirror image, what is not symmetrical? So we have seen the several alphabetical letters, right, which are symmetrical and which are not symmetrical. We tell them how, in terms of if A is placed in front of a mirror. Okay, so we will see exactly the same A itself. But let's assume if the E is being placed on mirror, for example, how you write E like this, and you are placing an axis vertically, and that vertical axis is actually a mirror. So what we will see, the reflection of E will be different. So hence it is asymmetrical. Now this is what I am talking about, is the very basic concept about symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. So in terms of a mirror image, that okay, if it looks exactly the same, then we tell it symmetrical. If it's not, then we tell it asymmetrical. We have seen for example, you are standing in front of a mirror, and exactly it looks like there are no certain things which will look different, so it kinds of becomes symmetrical. So now over here we have symmetrical balance. So what we are trying to mean via this very word symmetrical balance, I will just explain you. So in terms of when we are talking about symmetry and all these things in terms of a structure or so, that is something different. But when we are looking in terms of design aspect, in terms of a structure, in terms of anything related to our design principles, then symmetrical balance is slightly a bit different from what we are actually looking in terms of symmetry. Over here, symmetrical balance necessarily doesn't mean that on both the sides of the axis, things have to be look alike. So over here, what we mean that, for example, in this magazine of time, if I am having a vertical axis, so then what I will consider is on both the sides of the axis, the weightage of the composition should be similar. So what I mean by that is, let's assume we are having balance over here. If I am having, okay, I just try to unweight the screen. It will be better for you guys to understand. So let's assume over here, take a line. Over here, if I am having a straight a vertical axis over here, and I'm considering on both the sides of the axis the weightage of the composition. What I mean by that is how BAL is written, and one side of A and the other side is kind of equally symmetric. So in terms of these design principle also, we are seeing that okay, both the sides of the composition are like kind of similar. There are no such differences which will make a lot of difference in terms of the composition or so. But this simple composition could have been made asymmetric just by a simple object if I place on any sides of the axis. So let's assume I am taking this thing, solid square over here, and I'm placing a square over here, or I'm just trying to make a design over here. Okay. So now what we have over here, let's assume this is a kind of a design which is present on this particular side. Now we have a symmetrical balance. On the right hand side, the weightage of the composition is looks more bulkier, whereas on the left hand side of the composition, it looks like kind of less bulkier or less in weightage. This is a visual weightage. There is no physical metric system by which we can identify the weight, or we can tell that okay, this is what in terms of units if the weight is. Okay. So similarly, if I am talking about, let's assume this particular poster of Titanic, this is presently a symmetrical composition, but this composition could have been made easily asymmetric via, if I have some, let's assume on the left hand side of this deck, consider these things as people who are standing on the deck and watching something. Okay. The left hand side of this whole thing, there are several people, and on the right hand side there are very less number of people. Okay, just via the via the addition of these number of people on the right hand side, left hand side of the deck, and the right hand side leaving it completely blank, we could have easily made this poster of Titanic a symmetric composition. I guess I am clear till now. Any doubts, any questions which you have, any you didn't understand, tell me yes or no.
No, sir.
No.
So let's move ahead with the examples of how this symmetrical balance is being implemented in several aspects, in terms of a structure, in terms of our nature, and several other things similar to that. Okay. So I will go below and let's talk about some of the theoretical aspects. Symmetrical balance. So what is symmetrical balance? It's a formal, uniform, soothing, organized, and stability is present. Can be monotonous. Compositions looks highly balanced. Logo in printing and in other uses becomes a lot easier. Can be used from either side. Repetitive element makes it easier in architecture, ease of balance. So generally what we have seen in terms of structure, when we talk about this exact very line, repetitive elements makes it easier in architecture or ease of balance. What does the statement means? This simply means that generally whatever structure we have in our day-to-day life, everything is kind of made in symmetrical balance. You see your house, you see the next house, you see whatever buildings are present around you. People try to knowingly, unknowingly, people will make it in symmetrical balance. No one will be making a structure where one side is very tall, 6 floors, another side is just 2 floors. Or just something this is a very simple example I have told. They don't like normal structures. People don't try to complex it much. They try to maintain everything in a proper posture, in a proper balanced structure, so that it's easy for them also to do the mathematical calculations to make the structure practically possible, as well as for the people, the workers who are over there to build the structure. It's easier for them as well. This is when we are talking about a general structure. Now definitely we have seen over the time there are several examples in the world which are created several years back, and they are created to such a design, or they have used such sort of asymmetrical balance, which still date is one of the most important tourist destinations. The very best example is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is situated or created in a leaning position. So that is in a form of an asymmetrical balance. But that structure is not a structure which we find in our day-to-day life. Now talking about best balance looks in symmetrical balance. So it is very natural. When everything is symmetric, everything will look stable. So for example, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is kind of situated like this. So in an angular position, the structure is being made. So the point is like, people who are seeing it for the first time or just generally giving a look, your psychology will work like, okay, it might fall. If you see now, if you are leaving Tower of Pisa, if someone knows that they are visiting that place as a tourist destination, they already know that the feature of the beauty of this particular structure is that it is inclined. But suddenly, if you see, let's assume no one has told you, and you see a certain building in your town which is like this, what the first very feeling which will come is that, okay, this building might fall, might be this is an old building, right? So this is how these things work, and this is how, like, symmetrical balance are working out. So out from all these compositions, whatever we have seen, they are all the like different design principles which are possibly here that have been mentioned, along with some of the elements of design. We will not go into these things. We will complete, because this is a huge part that we need to discuss. There are several principles, several visual principle elements of design. Once we complete that, then we can come back and try to, like, find out, okay, what are the like things that is coming as per as the compositions which are over here. So, and what it is actually like, if you are, for example, I might ask you that, okay, this composition, what are the elements of design you see? And we will then try to compare the, okay, these are the things which are present. So anyways, we will try to move on and check out the next thing, like few examples related to symmetrical balance. So for example, this very first structure which we see over here is perfectly in symmetrical balance. If we are having, like, an axis vertically, both the sides, this is kind of an exact symmetrical balance in terms of a mirror image as well. Okay, several other structures which we see over here, for example, this Petronas Twin Tower, Malaysia, then this White House, then this normal building, the Taj Mahal in Agra, this Indian architecture, like, of a temple or something like that. Everything is in symmetrical balance. Now, see, in this Petronas Twin Tower, the like position of this particular building on the left hand side, the smaller building, doesn't make it asymmetrical. Now, when I am having a vertical axis over here, it is not a mirror image. The left side is not a mirror image of the right side, or vice versa. But as a whole, as a composition on both the sides of the axis, like, amount of weight, like things filled, or the weightage of the composition looks similar. Okay. Moving ahead, again, there are several design principles which are also mentioned for all these particular examples which you have seen. So we will just quickly move on and check out what are the other possible things over here. So over here, as we see, like, there are a few this thing, like a few compositions, 3 compositions and 1 statue, okay, or a structure. So how these things are in symmetrical balance again. See, everything is not in particular, again I am telling, is not in form of a mirror image or so. But for example, let's assume, let me take. So let's assume if this part, okay, if these people who are present over here inside the square were suddenly, like, moved away, okay? Or moreover, let's assume these people and these people who are present on this side, okay? These people were suddenly not present, they were vanished, and there was just this greenery was there, okay? These people are there, these people are there, these people on the side of the statue is there, these people on the right hand side is there, but the left hand side, the 2 sets of people who are inside the square are suddenly not present. Then what will happen is that the symmetrical composition will turn into asymmetrical. But that is anyways not possible. This is a, like, drawing made by one of the finest painters. So just for example, I am telling how this can be symmetrical. Okay. So this is symmetrical in, like, in terms of the weightage of the people, or the number of people in terms of a group, how they are placed or how they are positioned. Everything looks similar. Similar things, like, happens for this composition with a girl over here. Similar thing happens for this particular composition. The name of this composition is The Last Supper, made by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay. So what he has done over here is, see how the things are placed. So he wanted to put a focus on Jesus, who is in the center. Now, if you would have the, for example, let's assume how these people are placed, okay, on the left hand side, closely packed enough. Same thing happening over here on the right side. If there are several people in these particular positions as well, I will mark out the positions. So nearby Jesus in this red square, okay, If this red square was again filled by similar number of people, so how these people are compactly packed, if that same thing would have happened in around Jesus in this particular area, then the focus on this person wouldn't have been there. Okay. So hence, to put a focus, to put an emphasis on that particular person, this is how the painter has designed the whole thing. Now, again, along with that, you must also notice one more thing which we will have to look at. See, all the other people, they are over here and all, their background is not clear. Their background is darker and a lot of people closely packed. Whereas, since focus has to be put on Jesus, what has been done over here is simply like there has been made some windows or some openings with a very simple open brightened background behind him to put the darker the picture of this particular people inside has to be similar in terms of their contrast and the light falling on them. So keeping it similar, he has created some brighter backgrounds behind Jesus, and hence the focus falls or he is being emphasized. So this is how these things work. This is how these things come into play when a structure, a painting, or anything is being designed or composed. Moving on, again, name of, so what you need to know from these things is that just try to remember the name of these compositions and this structure. Don't worry, PDF will be shared with you once we complete the whole set of this design principle thing. Okay, you will get it in your study material section. So nothing to note down from here. Just try to go through it after the things are completed. Okay. Just give me a second. So as we were discussing, the very first composition over here was the grand altarpiece made by Jan van Eyck. Okay, what are the design principles and elements of design is mentioned over here. Now the next one is the self-portrait. Artist is Frida Kahlo. The last one is the Last Supper made by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, and this one is the Christ River made by Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The location of the structure. So this is actually what you need to remember, because things might come up you might be shown something from this particular composition only, and there have been some questions related to the same. So moving on, we will just check a few examples in the interior of a structure, the interior of a house and all, or any kind of place, how symmetrical balance is being well maintained. So over here, you can clearly see in the bedroom, everything is placed exactly in a way to make things look in symmetrical balance. Similar thing goes for this particular composition on the right hand side. Now, how this particular composition could have been made asymmetrical? The very simple answer is, if, for example, give me a second. So let's assume this particular sofa was made of some color like white, okay, or might be some creamy texture. Let's assume this particular composition sofa could have been made of some creamy texture and not dark with any dark color. Hence, the left hand side of the composition would have looked comparatively lighter. Right hand side would have looked way more bulkier in terms of the weightage of the composition, considering a vertical axis, hence asymmetrical. So similar thing, we have a same kind of example in the upcoming asymmetrical balance, all the compositions which are over there. Same kind of thing goes for the other visuals of the interior design which you see over here. We will move on to the next set of examples from our nature itself. Butterfly, very good example of symmetrical balance. The leaf, the leaf of these several plants, for example, normally what we get to see is always a symmetrically balanced, maintained leaf itself. But there are few leaves which are not, and these are the two examples where you get to see so. For example, now this hill section with water below, how exactly everything is being reflected and symmetrically balance is being shown. Now, I would have given you the example of how symmetrically balance could have been not maintained and made it asymmetrical. You'll get a very same example in the next part of symmetrical balance when we are going to discuss. The very similar example is present over there, wherein you will get to see it. Now, moving on, the starfish is also one of the best examples. So now what we have is asymmetrical balance. So we have completed symmetrical balance. We are going to study now exactly the opposite of the symmetrical balance thing. So there are quite a few logos present over here, and we will try to understand that how these things are like, working on, and how these things are giving an effect of like asymmetrically balanced composition. For example, we have the Apple logo over here, how it has been structurally placed. Now over here, see, most of the things are quite simple. How everything is kind of placed in vertical axis, but there are several compositions wherein you will have to consider diagonal axis as well. So that time you need to identify, okay, in what way we are. So for example, this Pepsi logo, okay, we don't have any diagonals. It is a circle. We don't have any kind of vertical, horizontal or diagonal axis inside it. Okay, but just keeping it like, if the axis runs like this, seeing what are the two parts in the composition, considering them side by side and how the axis can go. So on both the sides of the axis, it looks kind of asymmetrically balanced. This is all what we are looking at. Simply for YouTube, the very best example, how tube has been placed with a darker background and written in a lighter shade, it looks bulkier. It looks like a whole set of things, and you looks more lighter. So this is how it has been asymmetrically balanced. These things have to be understood, like, from the knowledge that you get down. So these things are not like, some you will verify, and so it's not a kind of formula, or it's not a kind of equation which will be cross verified via back calculation. These things have to be felt and seen. You need to see several compositions, understand how these things are being implemented, and you will do it. So how, for example, when you first, like, I don't know if both of you, or like, any student who is over here, if they know to ride a bike or something like that. Now the thing is that when you are riding a bike for the first time, you are taught how to press the clutch, like, and how to release it slowly, then change the gear, how to press the brakes and everything and all. But slowly and gradually, this things like, kind of becomes a reflex action. You felt, okay, this, like, there is a speed breaker ahead, I must reduce, and you just go and, like, all the actions take place adjacent to one another, and finally the implementation is over here. Same thing will happen over here as well. So what is asymmetrical balance? We'll just go through the terminologies used over here. High contrast in terms of shape, form, and elements of design. Sense of freedom, adventure, interesting, non-monotonous, smart, dynamic. Rebellious, irregularity, organic, engineered, natural shapes and placement. One needs to be very cautious and highly perceptive while developing asymmetrical balance. Risky and difficult to pull out, difficult to achieve rhythm. So these are the things we need to keep in mind. So high contrast in terms of shape. So what is contrast? I told, when things are not matching with one another, things are quite different. So shape, form, elements of design, and elements of design. So what do they mean by that? Is, for example, the shape of the sofa. Okay, for example, on the right hand side there is a sofa, left hand side there is a plastic fiber stool. So this is how, like, they are trying to make. If there is a difference, it will create a symmetrical balance. Sense of freedom and adventure is nothing but it's giving you a feeling of, like, exploration. Thing is like, quite different. Everything is not monotonous. Like, things are not. So for example, you are in a locality where every house looks the same, look alike, continuously. Like, you go, for example, you are walking through an old like Japanese road, wherein all the structures are exactly same, exactly, like, look alike. You will not feel, or not feel something like, okay, I should go there and check how that house looks. But whereas if like this, you are, for example, in South Bombay, and there are different structures over there, right? And you have checked this particular structure, now you feel like, okay, that looks a bit different, so I should go and check it out. Just for example purpose, I told, don't take it in, like, real life this will exactly how it will happen. Just for example purpose, I have told, and depending upon the circumstances which might arise. Interesting, non-monotonous, smart, and dynamic is what we are looking at. Rebellious, irregularity, again similar kind of terms as, like, opposite to the monotonous and all these things. Organic, engineered, natural shapes and placements. One needs to be very cautious and highly perceptive while developing a symmetrical balance. This is very natural, like, because any structure, this is in terms of structure, this sentence have, or this phrase have been told. So any, in terms of, let's assume the Leaning Tower of Pisa, when it was built, it is not a normal structure that, okay, things, columns will go like this and all, as structures will be built. It has to be built with a lot of perception that, okay, the, like, strength of the right hand side, whatever pillars and all these things are over there, they have to be more powerful, more constructive to hold the weight of these particular objects on the right hand side, and hence it will last for years and years and years, right? Risky and difficult to pull out, very natural again, like, if it is hard to be built, if there is a caution thing Walking in place, definitely it will be risky and difficult to achieve rhythm. Again, this is also very natural. So what is rhythm is like, when we are talking about rhythm, just give me a second. Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So let's continue. What is rhythm actually? So when we are talking about rhythm and all, what do we mean by that is rhythm? See, for example, you are walking down an alley and there is a kind of like, let's assume boundary, like if you are walking through a footpath, okay, and you will be seeing there are kind of rails which are over there with some sort of chains and all, which look exactly the same. So it is kind of a rhythm that, okay, a pillar will be there and again a chain like this. A pillar will be there, a chain like this. But if the same thing is present, so that is in symmetrical balance. Now, if you're talking about asymmetrical balance, what might happen is that, like, anything can happen. For example, okay, the very good example will be, let's assume you're walking down a road, okay, and you expect that, okay, there is a parking spot or there is a washroom or like, there is a parking spot after every, let's assume 2 kilometers, okay, you're driving down that road and suddenly you see that, or let's assume this is the very normal scenario what you see in western roads. But what will happen in Indian roads is that you are driving around and suddenly you see someone from that, like, this railings which are there in the highway and all, suddenly someone jumps up and walks through the road. Suddenly there is a dog running through the road. Suddenly someone, like, pulls up and parks anywhere else. So this is a normal scenario in our routes. So this is what is an asymmetrical balance. What I have told about the other thing is an like, symmetrically balanced things working out, like not a composition, symmetrically balanced and work, like, things which are being done in practical life. Now let's assume this set of scenario which is happening in the western countries and all is a like simple rhythm. You will already know what is going to happen. So it's kind of like you have seen these waves and all taught to you in physics, right? In wavelength of a ray and all. So there is a general natural up and down. There is a, like, up and down in all these waves. Now suddenly if the wave becomes like this, like as I guess you both have seen, or anyone, like, listening to the lecture have seen this thing, like, this ECG graphs and all. Have you guys seen ECG graphs? The thing working on, like, those monitors placed beside a patient in hospital or something like that. Am I audible to both of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You guys have seen, right? So let's assume a patient in a deathbed. You don't know what is going to happen next. The graph will be like, very irregular, right? So whereas for a normal patient, the thing will be kind of regular. Things, the up and down will be very natural. So this is what we are talking about rhythm. Since the word came up and it is also one of the important design principles, I have just tried to go in depth of it. We will be definitely discussing that in our lecture, like, upcoming parts ahead. Okay. Okay, now a few examples related to this asymmetrically balanced compositions. See the natural, now after all this discussion, are the structures giving you a sense or a feel of asymmetrically balanced? Tell me yes or no.
Yes, sir. It's giving some.
Are not kind of static. It doesn't makes you feel like that, okay, this is a perfect composition which is static or everything looks similar. You will not find, like, that, okay, this is how this particular building has been placed. Next one will be like this, next one will be like this. This is what we were looking at. Things are kind of dynamic, anything can happen at any place. This things feels like, okay, it's kind of falling off, but it's kind of stable, hence asymmetrically balanced. Next thing, like, happens for this structure, one side is very small, one side is very high. Similar kind of thing for is there for this house and for this other thing as well. If we move ahead again, okay, so again for all these things, what we need to know is the name of that particular structure, where is it located, and, like, who has built it, most importantly. So the first one is the National Museum of Qatar, built by architect Jean Abu. The next one is the Haider Akiv Center, located in Baku. Architect is Zahadi. He's an Indian architect. Next one is your asymmetrical balance. Sorry, Zahadi is not an Indian architect. I mean, sorry. asymmetrically balanced. So next one is this one which we are talking about, asymmetrical balance. Is just they have told the feature. So there is this composition is something like, you can tell might be it's a very natural or normal composition taken up, or this is a virtually created composition, nothing present in real life of significant importance. Okay. Next one, what we are looking at is the Galaxy Soho, Beijing, China. Architect is again Zahari. Okay. These are the things what we need to know, particularly for these compositions. For example, when someone tells you about Taj Mahal, the way you remember it and the way visually, in terms of your imagination, how the picture comes up. Similarly, this why you need to go through the structures and go through the names. Try to search that name on Google and find out how the structure looks from different other angles. So whenever the picture of this thing comes up, you should remember this, or whenever the name comes up, you should remember this particular structure. Okay. Just give me a second. So over here, what we get to see is the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, California. Architect is Frank Gehry. Okay. So this is one of the best examples of asymmetrical balance and a place for public to visit as well. So you see every structure or every particular shape which is being made over here is different from the other one. There is no similarity between two particular shapes. And this thing is happening in not only in terms of shape, but in terms of form, how the structure has finally come out in the 3D form of the structure. The texture, text by texture, what we mean by texture, we mean, for example, give me a minute. I am having a bottle over here. So give some good example with this. By texture, what we mean is, okay, this is the bottle cap. So the texture over here is kind of rough. I hope it is you guys can understand it, right? So if I move my nails on this, you'll get a sound. Whereas this particular surface is smooth. There are such irregularities which are present over here. If I move my nail, no such sound. So hence the texture of this top part is different. Texture of this bottom part is different. This is what we are talking about, texture. So for example, most of the people while getting their houses built and all, they try to look for some rough tiles which will be slightly a bit rough for the washroom mainly, so that the people doesn't slip off on water. So this is what we are talking about, texture. Okay. Some other most important examples in terms of paintings which are really important over here, and everything is asymmetrically balanced. For example, this first one, this is a normal composition over here which shows two people doing some sort of gymnastics and all. And if we consider the axis running vertical, and considering the way these two figures have been placed, one at top, one at bottom, doing different sort of exercises, we will consider this as an asymmetrical composition. Now the form of the exercise doesn't really matter. What matters over here is two structures are placed at two vertex. So if the same thing would have been this particular guy would have been guy or girl, whoever it is, would have been placed on the bottom part, on the surface, both of them were there, then we could have considered it as an symmetrical balance. Next one, this particular composition, name of this composition is the Starry Night, made by Van Gogh, Vincent Van Gogh, full name. The next one is The Room, made by again the Vincent Van Gogh. And last one is here, The Creation of Adam, made by Michelangelo. Okay, the first one is a drama scene, like what they have tried to show over here, just given nothing's very specific to remember also. Names of these compositions you need to remember: The Starry Night, made by Vincent Van Gogh, The Room, made by Vincent Van Gogh, and this one is The Creation of Adam, made by Michelangelo. Okay. Rest all design principles also, whatever is written over here, we will go into that, but in course of time, not really now. Okay, this is again another structure which is present in terms of symmetrically, best example of symmetrical asymmetrical balance. The sprouts, made by Vibhor Sangoni. Okay. Okay, now here are the examples what I was talking about. So for example, see how the sofa and this particular chair kept over here with the darker shades of color. So you can easily see the objects which are placed, the materials used, and the color of the objects on the left hand side looks comparatively more bulkier in comparison with the right hand side. Hence, this is asymmetrically balanced. What I tried to explain you with that sofa is same thing over here. For example, this canvas thing and all fills this right hand side top part, whereas the left hand side is just having a table and kind of looks blank. Hence, it's symmetrically balanced. Over here again, the work of the work of color itself along with the background and all, and same thing works over here. Okay, understood. For this interior partner, there is no doubts, I guess, in terms of how these things are working on, or just to understand psychologically, okay, that this is a symmetrical balance, not symmetrical. I guess you guys are getting it. Just tell me yes or no.
Sir, sir.
Okay, fine. Let's move ahead. And
Sir,
here we have the cover of few magazines, which clearly shows your how asymmetrical balance is working out. There is nothing much to explain about any of these. This is again the sense of the field that you need to understand how asymmetrical balance works, and hence you need to implement it when the questions will come, like mark out the 4 important visual principles in the composition given. Okay. Okay, now we are talking about few examples in nature. Now the left hand side one, this is pretty much clear how a symmetrical balance is working out. On this bottom composition, it's clear. On this composition also, I guess it's clear how this cell on the shell on this part is kind of closely packed with the scales, whereas on the right hand side there are no such scales, hence asymmetrically balanced. Now you might have a very simple question, which I have seen 95% of the students whom I have taken through this particular PDF, they have asked me this question, that sir, how this composition is being asymmetrically balanced? Why not symmetrical balance is being implemented over here? Do you guys also have the same question for this composition? Hills and this river thing?
No, sir.
no, sir. No.
No. Okay, so how it is being asymmetrically balanced? Quickly tell. I'll give you a minute time.
There are several trees in left hand side.
There are?
Mark is absent, sir.
How it is being asymmetrically placed? Can you tell me?
For one side of the river, marks as we are present, sir. Right
You're
hand
not
side of
audible
the-
properly. One side of the river?
Right hand side rocks are present, sir.
So how you are taking the axis? Axis is horizontal or axis is vertical?
Axis is vertical.
No, this is the mistake which you have done. See, first thing what you will consider over here is there is it's a clear water image is being made over here. Hence there
Yes.
will be a horizontal axis, right? Now, how in the previous composition, once we have seen this,
Yes, sir, we have seen.
go back, this is symmetrically balanced. So your first question which should come to your mind is, why this is not symmetrically balanced? What happened to this particular composition? The thing which is happening over here is, if we had a clear picture of the replication of these things with without these unwanted things. So let's assume the stones are present, but at a very far distance, and reflection is being created properly. But whereas we have the stones nearby over here, which are not creating a such reflection with so the top part of this picture looks completely okay and completely lighter, but the stones over here makes it look bulkier. Hence, it is asymmetrically balanced. Clear?
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now, this is one of the best examples of asymmetrical balance, the world map, where everything is everything looks different and everything is asymmetrically balanced. Moving down, we have the radial balance, which we need to check out. This is not really that important for your exam or so, but still we will check out in the next class quickly and proceed with the next part, that is your emphasis, contrast, and all these things. For this class, that's all. And I'll be ending the recording over here. People who are watching it in recorded class, thanks a lot, guys. We are ending this particular class over here. Okay.